What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Still Processing, the 76ers podcast. As you see, our mascot, Frankie, gracing the screen there in celebration of the Phillies trade deadline. Controversial as that may be. But I'm here, of course, with Sam DiGiovanni, as always, Justin Crosby. And there was news today outside of what was going on with the Phillies, outside of the local baseball team. We got some Sixers content. Reggie Jackson addressing the media for the first time, a little other Sixers news. So we're going to go into a little bit of all that and some more on today's episode of Still Processing, a 76ers podcast. All right, and welcome back again, Sam, Justin. How you guys doing today?
I'm doing good. Little known fact about our podcast mascot, Frankie. He is a huge fan of Seth Johnson. Very little known minor league player that's been kind of just, in the works trying to get his way to the big leagues. And the Phillies just happened to trade for him in the Gregory Soto deal. So he is obviously so over the moon. He's jumping from the far side. Usually he jumps from my chair to my desk. He just jumped right onto the desk as we started. So he's happy about that. I am mostly about the Phillies trade deadline, but also excited to talk up with you guys about some of the other Sixers stories and about Reggie Jackson. So yeah, I'm doing good and chilling.
Yeah. Well, who doesn't love a nice 25-year-old prospect? No, I think Seth's going to be good, though. I think he's going to get an opportunity in Philly as well, more importantly. I think ahead of the season, he was ranked, Baltimore's 8th best prospect?
That's what I saw, yeah.
Just about there. So it's curious to see where he'll land, after the deadline. Have not been keeping up with Baltimore's minor league team. But anyway, pivoting off of that, Justin, how you doing today, man?
I'm good, man. I think we're starting to get into the light low for the Sixers, but interesting Olympic stuff going on as well. So, just been paying attention to that, paying attention to our American over there representing Philly. But yeah, I'm all good.
Yeah, that was one of the few topics that was kind of kicking around the room, the Sixers media room before talking to Reggie earlier today was, Joel and just everything going on with the Olympics now. But I think we're going to be looking at hopefully kind of a kickback to some of the better performances that he's seen earlier during the, effectively the warm-up games, obviously dealing with a little bit of that bug in the last game. But Olympics are, we'll see where they go from here. But, the U.S. team doesn't look immortal, even though they took care of business against Serbia. So definitely a lot to watch there, and we'll have some more Olympic content as it continues to go on. First and foremost today, new Sixer Reggie Jackson officially signed with the Sixers earlier this morning. That addressed the media somewhat shortly thereafter to set the scene for how this man rolled out, which this was, I got to say, this was one of my best experiences, one of my most enjoyed experiences talking to a guy. Sam, I know you can double down on this.
Yeah, mine as well, too.
He comes out, so he was warm, going through his not like an official Sixers practice, obviously, but he was practicing in the Sixers gym at the practice facility. He comes out, he's not alone. Right behind him is bodyguard Andre Drummond rolling out for duty. He comes out, all jokes as Andre is, and right away Reggie shakes the hand and gets the name of every single person in the room. Journalists, general media members, videographers, literally everybody goes up to individually, gets their name, shakes their hand. Super, super high character move. Again, Andre's cracking jokes. And, we start getting ready to talk to Reggie, and just a genuine guy, he was funny, just like Andre, to have the two of them. They've played almost 300 games together. I think it's 296. They spent a lot of time together in Detroit. So just a heck of a relationship. I know a lot of people talked about the relationship of Reggie Jackson and Paul George coming, when the move was initially made, and for good reason, because Reggie Jackson has pointed to that relationship in the past. But him and Andre, I'll tell you, it was on a different level. Reggie called him his brother, and that was the vibe, So just a very relaxed, honest, fun opportunity talking to Reggie, and we learned a bit more about him, got some good stuff, and just a good fun experience. Sam, what were your takeaways talking to Reggie today?
Yeah, it was really cool for him to come out. Took his time to introduce himself to everybody. Seeing him with Drummond there was obviously very cool. That was one of the main connections of that he would be, joining the Sixers already, knowing his fifth NBA team now. He spoke a lot of the general stuff that other guys have talked about this offseason about all the great stuff going on here, the stars that he has to play with, the chance that the team has to really do something special. I'm sure all of the guys we've spoken to this offseason have used that word, but I particularly remember Reggie and Caleb Martin both pointing to the chance to really do something great here. Reggie was asked about, among other things, his role that he anticipates having with the Sixers, which is something that I had planned to ask about if it wasn't asked first already. I believe it was Keith Pompey who asked about what he expects out of his role, coming here with some established guards, a lot of other players similar to him on the depth chart. And he gave a pretty, not basic answer, but kind of what you would expect, talking about how he's here to just help the team win, how he's here to just be the best teammate that he can be, play at the position that he needs to be, just help out the guys when he can. And I think that mindset is going to be particularly important for him. I mean, I'm sure he knows what he's getting himself into, but the Sixers already have their guard room kind of set up with Maxey starting, Kelly projected to start alongside him. Kyle Lowry's going to get minutes, obviously. And so Reggie will kind of be, fighting for minutes alongside Eric Gordon, McCain, Lowry, depending on what Nick Nurse wants to do with playing 2 point guards or whatever. So I think, him coming here with the expectation of being a good teammate and playing only sparingly, I think will only serve to really help him, because that does seem to be his role. To hear him say that, I think was pretty good. Had a lot of other good things to say about his NBA journey, winning the championship with the Nuggets. He said he was asked about sharing a nickname with an MLB Hall of Famer, or sharing a name with an MLB Hall of Famer, and he joked that he let him borrow it, even though the other star athlete, Reggie Jackson, is much older, played in his career a long time ago. But that was pretty cool. And I didn't know that the baseball Reggie Jackson went to Cheltenham is a Philly guy. That was cool to learn.
Shout out Keith for that local info.
Yeah, Keith Pompey mentioned that too. But yeah, it was really cool to hear from Reggie. It was definitely surprising based on when it happened, who they already had for them to sign him. But he seems to be, he mentioned being a great locker room guy. That's kind of part of what he's been known for in his career. Having that experience with Andre and Paul George was, cool to hear from him firsthand. And I truly don't know what to expect out of him this season. It depends on injuries, depends on, how things shake out. I wouldn't project him to be a rotation player, but if, anything, just based on how he was today and the relationship he already has with Andre and his excitement of playing with all the guys the Sixers have, I think he'll, fit in pretty well here.
Yeah, it's curious when you look at obviously the sizing. He's got a crazy long wingspan, like 7 feet long, but he's 6'2", kind of on the small side, alongside, Maxey, Kyle Lowry, and the projection, at least the way that it's seeming so far, is for Maxey to take on that true point guard role. Unlike last season where you had Lowry and Maxey in the backcourt, you're probably looking at Tyrese in that position, and then you're going to have whether you are putting Kelly Oubre there, which obviously the initial tweet about his signing signal that he was the starting shooting guard, or if you put him in like a kind of a power forward Aaron Gordon type role, whatever the case is, you're probably going to have Caleb Martin in that case. Whatever flexibility they do with that roster construction, it's looking like Kyle Lowry is going to be the first guard off the bench, or I guess I should say the point guard off the bench. So what opportunity does that leave for Reggie Jackson? I don't know, unless Lowry kind of gets put into that starting lineup. But I'll tell you this, I don't mind having the depth. And, I get that the guy wasn't overly efficient last season. But I do think that if there is opportunity given to him, I do think that he'll be capable of seizing that opportunity. And it's nice just to have a little bit of an extra scoring punch off the bench. Contrary to what his wingspan would imply, he's not like a DeAnthony Melton type. He's not really going to be that plus defender. He's not going to get into the lane as often as you would expect. He doesn't rack up steals like you think he would. But offensively, I think it's nice to have a guy who can contribute and is just a little crafty in terms of what he can provide just as an offensive spark in those rare cases that he would need to be. But I do agree that I don't think this is a guy who has a regular spot in the rotation. Justin, what do you think about Reggie Jackson? I don't think we ever got your take on the original signing. And do you think, what kind of role, if any, do you think that he's going to have this season?
I think he'll be a bench guy, but I do think that they're getting insurance for kind of like the campaign role. Like if injuries happen or guys are out, multiple guys are out, maybe Kyle Lowry's on a night off or whatever the case may be as the backup point, and maybe McCain hasn't really solidified his role in the rotation yet. I think they'll look to Reggie Jackson. He's a veteran. They're expecting him to be a good locker room guy and to basically be ready for when it's time for his number to be called. And there's nothing more that you can ask for. He's been in big moments. Clearly, he's won a championship. He's played with Paul George. And really, him and PG catapulted that Clippers team to the Western Conference Finals. Really, he played like lights out. So I think just having that experience off the bench, I think will help. So I think he'll be a bench piece and step up whenever he's called on.
Yeah, and again, how often will that be? We don't know. You mentioned Jerry McCain, and what's his role really going to look like? When Kyle Lowry signed back with Philadelphia, it kind of seemed like, all right, well, they're going to run him a little bit of the off guard, mostly, which that's basically what he did at Duke. That's a good way to kind of warm him into the rotation in Philadelphia. You expect, and Nick Nurse said this actually, the day that Tyrese and Paul George spoke to the media, we had a chance to speak with Nick as well. And he did mention that there was going to be opportunity for these young guys. He talked mostly about Ricky Council, obviously. But that opportunity is going to be there for McCain, but he's going to have to push for those minutes too, because when you are talking about having guys like Maxey, like Lowry, now you have Jackson as a depth guy, you have Eric Gordon at the 2, and you're talking about possibly having Caleb Martin or Kelly Oubre as your starter at the 2 alongside Maxey. There's kind of tough spots for opportunity there. You kind of really have to force the issue. And granted, this team could look a lot different, by the time the trade deadline is come and gone. And, it could very well be players like I would expect Lowry to still be here, but Reggie Jackson could be, one of those guys on the move in the future. Eric Gordon could be one of those guys on the move. KJ Martin is the guy everyone thinks of. It seems almost the reason that he's here is to eventually be on the move. But, just with that volatility, it is nice that you have a little bit of optionality as the season goes on. You've already secured the services of a Reggie Jackson just in case, hey, we had to give up both Eric Gordon and Jared McCain at the deadline. We need some added guard depth. Whatever that kind of situation may be, you have that flexibility in the roster construction. But taking things back to Reggie and what he had to say to us earlier today, the really interesting thing I thought was just how excited he was to kind of get to that grind. He's just very motivated to play for a contender. Obviously, a big reason that he came here. Well, Kai Carlin of Sixers Wire asked him, what kind of, why he came to Philly, and he instantly pointed right at Andre Drummond, and everyone got a chuckle out of that. But he kind of broke things down from there, and one of the things that he spoke about was just the team's competitive level, as Sam you alluded to earlier, and he kind of focused on that a little bit throughout the entire conversation that we had with him. And he talked about, kind of giving his all for, for the team that's on his back and making proud the name that's on the front. And just that. And granted, like, listen, this is the first time he's addressing the media after just signing. Like, he's saying all the right things. I get that people want to be, that they feel some type of way about those type of statements. Even when Paul George spoke and he was saying all the right things, that's how people were reacting as well. But we going off the information that we have, which is what he said to us earlier today, he seems incredibly motivated to perform at a high level and go on a deep run with this team. And I think that's something to be excited about. And whether or not he gets a ton of opportunity on the floor, which he's certainly going to have to work for. We already talked about that kind of blockade in front of him. I think he's somebody who's going to be good for the locker room. I think it's good to have that kind of guy around Andre Drummond, around Paul George. I think he's going to be, someone who's going to impact Maxey in a positive way. And yeah, things are just, I think, looking positive for, kind of the culture and the general vibes in the clubhouse. We talked about the Phillies, like that was the whole thing, once upon a time when the Phillies were actually a functioning baseball team. The vibes were so high, that just the way that these guys interact with one another. And Reggie Jackson is just kind of the latest in a long line of these guys who interact well together and have these histories. And Paul George said that Joel Embiid has been his closest, one of his closest All-Star game friends. Kelly Oubre refers to himself as the triplet to Caleb Martin and his twin brother. You have guys like Tyrese Maxey and Kelly Oubre who got along fantastically last season, and we're very excited that he's back. Tyrese Maxey's also talked about how much Kyle Lowry's meant to the team. Lowry has the connection with Nick Nurse. Eric Gordon has the connection a little bit with Paul George, but mostly, with Daryl Morey. Like we can go on and on and on. Like there's connections all up and down this roster effectively. And who knows, with the 14th player on this roster, they're going to head in with 14, not 15. That could be another player that has connections to Philadelphia. Marcus Morris, just throwing it out there, is a guy who it has been speculated. And you kind of wonder, well, why hasn't it happened yet? We'll see. Maybe that means that it's not long to be. But if it is, not only does he have connections to the team playing for them last year, not only does he have Philly ties here as well, he's also played even more games with Reggie Jackson than Andre Drummond has. So, those connections, those ties, are really throughout the entire locker room, almost top to bottom. Even some of the younger guys like Ricky Council has been taken under the wing at Tyrese Maxey, like that kind of stuff. The culture of this club, the seeming chemistry of it is incredibly high by, every measurable thing that you can see at this point in time, which is shocking for a team that went through such a drastic roster change this offseason. So, I guess really what I'm getting to, Sam, what encouragement do you have by the way that this team interacts with one another and this type of culture and chemistry that's being created in Philadelphia? What is your level of excitement as it pertains to that? Are you kind of I need to see it on the court kind of guy, or do you think that's a positive sign heading into training camp?
I mean, I think a little bit of both. It's definitely positive that guys know each other and that guys have played together, but also with how many new guys are coming in, I think it is important to see what Nick Nurse and the coaches have, how they end up putting all these pieces together. I can't really pinpoint if how much of a specific focus it was from the front office to find guys who are familiar with one another. I think just the fact that they have a roster so full of guys who have played a while in the NBA, decade plus, a bunch of guys have played in the league, and even some of their guys who are, less experienced, like, Caleb Martin, even though he still has plenty of years in the NBA. So I'm sure there's some level of overlap that just like always happens because, there's only so many NBA players that are all moving around. And so by some chance, guys are going to play with a former teammate on multiple stops. Again, I don't think it was the particular, focal point of Daryl Morey, Elton Branding Company, but I think that it's kind of hard to overlook the fact that so many of the guys have, played with or are familiar with at least one other guy on the roster that in a pretty significant way too. Like, again, Reggie Jackson, Andre Drummond, they played a while for the Pistons. Reggie played with Paul George for a while. Caleb Martin and Kyle Lowry spent time together on the Heat, and Caleb Martin, he pointed to Kyle Lowry as someone who he looks at as I think big brother is what he said, and someone who, if he thinks it's a good fit for Lowry, it'll be a good fit for him as well. With all the changes the Sixers have had to make through, co-stars and guys that get in the draft and move on from after a few years around, in this era led by Joel Embiid, it's really tough to establish that continuity. I feel like that's one of the most frequent things Embiid has talked about over the years is not having that. And obviously the Sixers are going to have to kind of start from the ground up, from square one, now that they have these guys in place. But at least with Maxey under contract for multiple years, same with Paul George, same with Caleb Martin, with Lowry and Oubre coming back, KJ Martin for however long he is, and for the new guys to have some other familiarity on a brand new team, I think is obviously super, super helpful. And I think that for the Sixers to have it like now, better late than never, obviously. Some of the reasons that guys had to be moved was, in and out of their control. But now that they're, coming together now with guys who know each other, it's not like you're going to click it exactly, but I do think it helps fast track it at least a little bit. I think at the very least, guys being familiar with one another, guys knowing what guys are all about in seemingly good ways, that I think lends to, getting along better together. And then I think that can lead to sacrificing for each other, being willing to play with each other and, play for the guy beside them more likely than they are someone who they haven't played with. So I think at the very least that will work in the Sixers' favor. And again, it'll change a little bit based on how the roster moves during the season and whatnot, but at least starting out with a foundation of guys who are relatively familiar for a bunch of newcomers, which I think is kind of an oxymoron, but you kind of get what I mean. I think it can only help. As different as, as new as this roster is to itself, I think it can only be beneficial.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Kind of just in a vacuum, it's nice that the guys actually like each other as opposed to some of the previous Sixers teams, which have not gotten along as well, both on and off the court. So that it's good. It's good when the guys like each other. So next step, and this is a big job for Nick Nurse, getting it all to work together on the court. So that's going to be the major question mark there. Justin, how do you feel that this team is going to work with each other on the court? Obviously this isn't I would say it's unusual for Philadelphia to be able to just kind of that's not even actually correct if you talk about James Harden, but with the addition of Paul George, let's put it this way. This is the first time in recent memory that they've brought in a marquee star level addition that actually fits. How do you think that is now going to go for Philadelphia? Now that the pressure's on, that there's effectively no more excuse in that capacity?
I think ultimately, this iteration of the team, Sam talked about it, guys been around for multiple years. I mean, everybody wants them to win a championship, but I think with the talk of continuity and stuff like that, I think having these guys around for multiple years is going to help the bond. I think on the court, I think they're just going to have to figure out to make it work. Of course, you got your best five, but I think they're going to have to find a way to determine which combinations work the best with certain guys on and off the court. Who's the best with Embiid outside of starting five, who's the best with Maxey. And I think Nick Nurse is going to have a lot of, things to try out in the preseason and regular season. But the one thing I will say about Nick Nurse is that he will give these combinations a chance, and he will try to find the best combination for the team. And he's not afraid to try something different randomly during the regular season, different defenses, different lineups, rotations, and bring it out in the playoffs when needed. So I think that it'll take time for them to find a niche. I do think that having a guard, a wing, and a center as your three main guys, it just makes sense cohesively. So I think, having those guys be the main guys, I think is good. Also, I think that Joel being a part of this Olympic experience is helping them out, learning how to defer with others. I think that's big too. Paul George has already been a part of those situations before. And I think, with Maxey, he's already learned how to defer. He's been with multiple guys on and off he's been with Harden. He's been with, Ben. He's been with all these other guys where he had to change his game for whatever the situation is. So, Maxey will be willing to turn it on and off when he needs to. So ultimately, I think it's good. I think the guys knowing each other. I think somebody like Drummond really wanting to come back to Philadelphia and not just for the cheesesteaks. I feel like, all that, these guys are going to have good vibes. I think a lot of this is also coinciding with Embiid's maturity as a leader and as a man. I think before, he's probably still a very private person, but I think, there's always been a talk about how Doc Rivers kind of was like, hey, you got to be a leader, go out with the team. And now he's doing stuff in his own way. And, I really talk about how, when they were losing in the Knicks in game 6 down a lot, he was encouraging his guys, not having bad body language, and that shows maturity and leadership. So I think that'll be part of it. So hopefully, it'll help with, the continuity on the court and off the court.
Yeah, and you talked about Andre Drummond. I'd like to focus on him just for a moment. First of all, just one of the coolest guys that you'll get a chance to talk to, one of the most friendly guys as well. He absolutely really wanted to come back to Philadelphia. That was another thing that we were kind of talking about, is just how happy he seems in Philadelphia, right? And I don't think anyone wanted him to leave the way that he did. It was kind of, you make a move for a guy who, you think is a top 10 player. Can you say no to that deal because of Andre Drummond? I don't think anyone would say that. You can say that, which is why the deal happened. But it obviously hurt the Sixers. Everyone can tell that from the playoffs. And, it was an unfortunate missed opportunity for Drummond and the Sixers. And then obviously last season, Philadelphia wanted to bring him back. Talks with Chicago progressed significantly. And, it seemed like Philly thought that they had a deal. Like everything that I've heard seemed like it was a done deal to Philly. And then Chicago ultimately decided that they didn't need to get any compensation for Drummond. They just let him walk. Whatever about Chicago. We're not a Bulls podcast, and I don't have that time to delve into their many mistakes. But what delay it, however it was, Andre Drummond is now back in Philadelphia. You can tell that's important to him. That when he spoke to us, whenever his availability was, 2 weeks ago, maybe. When he spoke to us, he made it clear that he loves the area. He loves playing with Joel. He loves playing for the Sixers. And when he was here last time, he was going to Blue Coats games, representing and supporting that younger Sixers generation. And every team should want a guy like Andre Drummond, just not only for his on-court performance, which, again, best backup that Joel Embiid has had in his entire career. But beyond that, just the meaning of this guy to the fan base, to your locker room, somebody who truly wants to be there and wants the best for everybody. Listen, I know this game is played on the court and not with vibes, but the vibes are great. And that's just you can't take that for granted. Sixers fans out there, you cannot take that for granted. Since the process started, percentage of time the vibes have been above average. Like legitimately it might be under 25%. And that might even be generous. I wanted to go much lower, but out of respect for the team, I'm going to keep it right around there. Vibes haven't been great, have not matched the level of technical success that the team has seen. There was a joke at Paul George's press conference about the team not making it past the second round. Or I guess it was a legitimate question that Josh Harris then joked about. But either way, like that, there's truth behind that, right? So, there's been a lack of success in Philadelphia. There has been constant strife with the roster, constant turnover with the roster. So, to bring a guy like Andre Drummond back, someone who really wants to be here, I think that is huge for Philadelphia. And it's a part of their highly successful offseason, which actually leads us perfectly into our next point. ESPN ran an anonymous poll where they spoke to 18 members of different organizations across the NBA. So that's coaches, scouts, and executives that they spoke to. And they asked them to vote on, several different topics, but among them was who had the best offseason in the NBA. And it's rare that Philadelphia wins a popularity contest, which you can say that some teams are going to vote honestly, but I think there's always a bit of bias that follows really anything. But with nearly twice as many votes as the second place team, the Sixers were voted as having the best offseason so far in the entire NBA. So notable acquisitions, obviously Paul George. They did bring in Andre Drummond, we mentioned, Reggie Jackson, we mentioned, Eric Gordon. They did bring in Caleb Martin, which was a huge addition for Philadelphia. They brought back Kelly Oubre, which I think most people thought was not a possibility. They did re-sign Maxey, which while it seemed inevitable, it's great that they actually did it. Execution is different than what seems to be inevitable. So bringing back Kyle Lowry, this team is looking very strong. Even the drafting of Jared McCain and Adem Bona was widely praised across the league, in terms of who they selected in that draft. So, they were picked as the top team just by some of their peers across the league. Justin, where do you think the Sixers fall in that regard? Are they deserving of that top title? Are they in the conversation? Or do you think that this is just, kind of just a sexy name to pick because they signed the top free agent?
I mean, I think it's deserving. I think, there was a lot of hoopla around Daryl and, you know, his inactivity during the trade deadline and all his other stuff. And when it seemed very bleak with Paul George, what the options were out there, there's just a lot going on. So I do feel like, this was the offseason with a blank canvas that Daryl got to build the team that he wanted to build, and he went out and did it. And I think it is worthy of the top spot because he went out and got the best player. He went out and complimented his two current stars and now his third star with players that fit better around them. Yeah, there are some things you want to talk about rebounding that they can get better with, but it seems like they have a contingency plan with possibly players like KJ Martin or other guys to make deals work in the future. So I think it's worthy of it. I think him and Elton did a great job. I feel like whatever, Joel going on countdown, whatever his part of recruiting and doing stuff was pretty good too. And I think that it's definitely worthy for it. And I think that obviously people see how well the fit is, and as long as the health is good for this team, I think. I'm not saying they're going to win a championship, but I think they will be respected in the league. I do think they will be respected in the league and as one of the top teams in the East. And they can, give the Celtics a run for their money, the Knicks, Cleveland, Orlando, Milwaukee, whoever. I think they're up at the top of that stratosphere. And they just got to come together. And I think they have the right coach to do it, who's willing to try a bunch of things. I think if you get a coach that's not willing to try lineup style or just stay with the same old thing, I think you have more margin, you have less margin for error. So, or less margin to try things out. So I think, from there, I think it's excellent. I think they had a great offseason and they need to be commended for the work that they did.
Sam, how are you feeling about that same topic? Are you, I don't want to say, riding the Sixers hype train, but, are you feeling as confident in their offseason so far? Or does it take one more noteworthy move for you to call it the best offseason in the NBA?
Well, I think the calling it the best offseason is fair because they simply made the biggest move of signing Paul George. You can there's arguments to be had about other impactful moves and whatnot, but the fact that they got kind of the biggest fish in the pond, I think just kind of easily lends itself to the idea that, like, they had the best offseason. You can look at like the Knicks trading for Mikal Bridges, but they did have to give up all those picks on top of, making room for Bridges' salary as opposed to, just landing a guy in free agency. And as Justin mentioned, the things around the edge to set themselves up nicely for another big move they'll have to make to be taken more seriously as championship contenders. The fact that they, just stood pat in the draft and took some guys who were regarded as two of the hardest workers in the entire draft class to flesh out their depth more to, obviously spending the max money you have to on Paul George, but to continue to build some depth around the core that they have, and obviously extending Maxey, which again was the obvious move, but not only did they, give him the max he deserved, they built the whole museum for him to show their appreciation and, made it clear to him that like he made it possible, which he did because of his patience. And so I think the fact that they got voted the best offseason, again, I think a lot of that is because Paul George is carrying that cachet. But what I also found interesting looking through the survey here from Tim Bontemps was there was a vote for the worst offseason, and the Sixers didn't get a vote. Wait a minute. I could have sworn someone mentioned.
I thought they had 3 votes for that.
I see what it was. So there was what was the best move of the NBA offseason, and Paul George to the Sixers got the most votes with 6, but then he also got that move also got 3 votes for the worst move. That was the one that I found interesting. That and the Bridges move, it shows the varying opinions of I think it was 18 people that Bontemps interviewed, a very wide range of opinions on some of the bigger moves.
Yeah, you wonder.
Obviously, the Clippers, the Magic, and Golden State were the 3 teams that didn't like the move.
Fair to speculate.
Yeah, no, it's tough to think. I mean, listen, like there were people in Philly who, for whatever their reason may be, and whether that was trying to soften the blow if Paul George did not eventually come to Philadelphia, or whatever the case may be, did point out things like the amount of money you're having to give to Paul George, his age, things like that, which I think are legitimate factors to weigh in the decision. However, that is outweighed by his level of play and the fact that you're not giving up draft or player assets to obtain him. So, with that being considered, no, I mean, myself personally, I would not have that towards the bottom there. I would have that, again, more so towards the top of some of the best moves. Maybe I would have to look through everything again. The Caruso trade is, I mean, that is a significant deal. It's just both what was given up and Caruso, the addition of Caruso himself, I think of more so as it's a finishing complementary move as opposed to adding a major star. So that's the reason why I might go Paul George over that. But the Caruso move, I think, is which did get mentioned in the article, certainly deserving of some consideration in that spot. But it's been an interesting offseason so far for the Sixers. The running theme has been, what's this going to look like on the court? Unfortunately, we don't have that answer until we actually see what it looks like on the court. But for now, everything is shaping up okay. Things could continue to be better, with this final spot. Again, they said Daryl Morey said that they're going to run him with 14 players, not 15. So that's why we're saying one final spot. So one potential Sixers target, Precious Achiuwa, was signed today, re-signed with the Knicks for $6 million. So with that said, just another quick check-in. I'm surprising you guys with this, but just real quick, one name that is still out there that you would like the Sixers to get that would really put this offseason over the top for you. Who would that be? Sam, why don't we start with you?
I like Chetty Osman. It's surprising to see that he's still a free agent. I think that signing another guard would be quite hilarious given just the loading up on centers last year. Now you go all the way with guards, even though it would be ridiculous to sign another small guard. But Osman is someone who is wing size, about 6'7", shoots the ball really well, has a really nice feel as a passer, and can kind of apply himself on defense and be decent and can hold his own on that end, at least when needed. He's a guy that I think would fit in really well with what the Sixers, need as far as continuing with, floor spacing and getting more of a scoring impact off the wing. And as someone who can handle the ball a little bit and create, or just kind of keep the ball moving, we saw last year Nico Batum was huge in that regard. And I don't think Osman is the cerebral playmaker, floor reader that Batum was, but I think he has way more juice as a creator for himself and just an overall scorer, which I think might lend him to more opportunities, finding the advantage himself off the dribble, and then fighting a teammate, even if he's not as a high IQ playmaker. So he's someone that I honestly don't think would sign for the minimum. There are plenty of teams out there that still have some tax level MLE stuff available. There are other teams where Osman could probably play more. I mean, I think the Sixers seem to be riding heavily on Ricky Council as one of the backup forwards, or just going with like a more strict 9-man rotation. But I think Osman, as a veteran, a guy who shoots the ball really well, would fit super nicely. The only question is if he's willing to come to a team for so cheap, or if he's willing to come for a team where playing time isn't certain. But he would be someone that, if that's who they round out their roster with, I would be pretty excited.
Yeah, I think the versatility of his game, specifically offensively, is definitely a tremendous value. Will he take the minimum? His options are kind of getting a little limited. So, that's kind of where I tend to think that he may be. I mean, we just saw, Tyus Jones take the minimum. Granted, that was for a starting spot on the Phoenix Suns. Even still, like, guys are taking less money than they expected. So, Cedi Osman, for a chance to contend, yeah, I could see a world where he does take the minimum for that opportunity. But Justin, what about a name for you that sticks out?
I really don't have a necessarily name. Like I was trying to think of options. Of course, you think about guards, but they don't need a guard at this point. So I don't know. A couple, like one or two names that come to mind. The first is like we need to know if he ran out of gas, but Jay Crowder kind of fits the toughness, can hit an open three, probably lost a step, so you can't depend on him guarding the best perimeter players, but he could be somebody who can come in a pinch and, work with the team, help rebound, stuff like that. It's not a best rebounder because he's still not, so he might be like 6'7", 6'8", but I think somebody like Jay Crowder could fit. It just depends on how much he has left in the tank. Like, he's definitely took a step back on defense. He used to be counted on to be one of the best perimeter defenders on Phoenix when they were in their finals run. And then, his kind of first half of season or a little bit of season in Milwaukee. But, outside of that, I feel like, we're at the point now where he might fit, or I don't know, maybe if Rocco's knees are working, Rocco.
Yeah, health depending. We haven't gotten an update on the health of Robert Covington since he initially went out, and I find that extremely concerning. I would love for him to return to the team. I think that what he provided on the court was like tremendously valuable, and especially now that the team doesn't have D'Anthony Melton, to be able to have a guy who just really kind of does the dirty work and gets in there and is able to get those deflections like Robert Covington would be huge. So, he's a guy who for sure I would love to see in Philadelphia, not unlike Cedi Osman. For me, I think I'm kind of full circle and I'm all aboard the Marcus Morris train. Listen, getting a guy who can shoot as well as he does, I get the limitations and I think expectations should be tempered. But think about how far down the roster we're talking about. Like, there's frankly not a guy out there, unless you're going to say Markelle Fultz is going to take the minimum, which, again, the Sixers don't need another guard. There's really not anybody now that Precious Achiuwa is signed that I think is a marquee addition. So to land a guy who not only has that familiarity with the squad, I want to preface this by saying I'm not a Gordon Hayward fan. So I know that's going to be a name that comes up. That's why I'm not mentioning, I am mentioning him. That's why I'm not saying him to Philadelphia. I'm not a Gordon Hayward fan. I don't like the game. I don't like his style. We just had somebody who played a style like that in Philadelphia, and it clearly was not a positive fit. So I'm all out on Gordon Hayward. With that being said, like Lonnie Walker is like an interesting guy, but again, that guard, like there's just not, you need a bit more size, and there's just not a lot of great options in that range. So for me, get the guy who not only knows the city, who knows the players, but just get a guy who can stretch the floor. Like that is it's the most marketable skill at a position of need Marcus Morris possesses, right? You can talk about a guy like a Luke Kennard who can do that at the guard spot. You don't need any more guards. You can talk about, guys who are interesting. Lamar Stevens is a solid defender. Chetty Osman, as you mentioned, has a bit of a facilitation game to his credit, and he's also a decent shooter. But to get a true, 4-5, a true power forward center who can legitimately stretch the floor consistently and adds a little bit of toughness as well, not to mention that he's a boost in the locker room. Like, to me, there's too many boxes that he's checking to not be interested there. So, again, it's probably less likely than it would have been a month ago. But to this day, like I'm all aboard for Mook coming back to Philly. I think that's the best case scenario, barring any other player being cut.
Well, I'll say this. Listen, I'm all for a public league class of 07 to come back and play for the Sixers. So if it's Mook, what we call him, twin, whatever, it'll be love. And side note about Marcus Morris or the Morris twins, they sponsored a flag football team in a super competitive flag football league I used to play with, and they actually played quarterback or wide receiver earlier in the season. It was like in the spring, late spring, and they were pretty good. I mean, clearly both 6'8", 6'9", so they kind of did what they wanted on the field. But it was interesting to see that they were pretty good at football as well.
Yeah, and it's. I was gonna ask, but I don't know that anyone here would know. Since we're talking about the Morris, twins and effectively the community, the Danny Rumpf Classic is coming up. Is it this week or next week?
This week starts on
Thursday.
Thursday.
I should know. I'm going, so I should figure that out. So it's this week.
Yeah.
So obviously, we're used to seeing a lot of big, Philadelphia names. So there are a couple names that I'm wondering if they're gonna, be there taking in the sights and everything like that. So
they will. They have another.
They usually are.
Yeah,
they have a team this year too.
Yeah. So they'll be there. I don't know if they'll be playing. They haven't played in the last couple years. They didn't play last year, but or they play like championship or semifinal stuff like that. But they'll be there. They have their team FOE usually there every year, so they'll be there for sure.
All right, sick. Well, that's coming up this weekend, Danny Rumpf Classic. It's Thursday through Monday. On the next episode, maybe we'll go over a quick little recap of that. But just some exciting local Philly basketball going on. But for now, thank you so much for joining us today on another episode of Still Processing. I've been Zach Chavalella here with Sam DiGiovanni and Justin Crosby. And we just brought you another episode of Still Processing, the 76ers podcast.